Okay, folks, let's quickly start then. Welcome everybody. Meeting the Employment Committee. Fiona, hello. Do come and join us. Fiona, come and have a seat at the table. Don't sit in the cheap seats. There we are. One. Okay. So, colleagues, welcome to this. If we just go around the table to introduce everybody so that people on screen watching have an idea who we are and why we're here. So I'm Gerald Van Jackson, I'm leader of the council, and I'm here as chair of the Employment Committee.
My name is Yahya Chaudhry, and representing our Child Weekend Sword from the Labour Party. That's it.
I'm Darren Sanders. I'm a Liberal Democrat councillor representing the Baffins ward.
Councillor Donna Jones, Conservative Leader of the Opposition.
And Vice Chair of this committee. Yes, so it says on your papers.
Matthew Williams, AS Politics student, shadowing Donna Jones for the day.
Helen Kane, Assistant Director of HR.
Kate Brady, Apprenticeship Officer.
John Woods, Chair of Portsmouth City Unison.
And looking slightly sleepy after having been to a conference for a week.
Richard White, Unite Regional Officer.
Roland Bryant, Learning and Development Business Partner.
John Bell, I'm the Council's HR Director.
Mark Tutton, Head of Building Services.
Michael Lawler, Deputy Chief Executive.
Vicky Fleethouse, Democratic Services.
Okay, colleagues, I'm told in terms of housekeeping, there are no fire alarms scheduled, so if there is one, it's real, and we need to go and meet over by Queen Victoria. And it's being web streamed, so if people are watching, hello and welcome. I think everybody's here works for the council, coming to speak to it. If anybody doesn't want to be web streamed, be in an area where you're not on camera, which is over there. So if everybody wants to be, we're also joined by Fiona from the news. Fiona, do you want to wave at the camera or at us so that we all know who you are? Excellent. Okay, colleagues. First thing we have on the agenda is apologies for absence. Donna, I understand you've got a couple of apologies.
Yeah, apologies from Councillor Fleming and Councillor Stubbs. One is on holiday and one, I understand, is at a job interview.
Excellent. And have we got any subs covering their places? No.
One of my other subs, Simon, is also at a job interview in Canary Wharf at the moment. So, and another one's on holiday, and another one I simply don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't get that far on the calling list.
Okay. Colleagues, any declarations of interest that people need to make? No. Sue, you have joined us since we've done the introductions. Do you want to say who you are for the camera?
Sue Page, I'm the Finance Manager.
And bearer of glad tidings. Okay, folks, shall we move on? First thing we need to do is the minutes of the last meeting. Colleagues, are you happy with the minutes of the meeting of the 22nd, 7th of February? Great. Okay. Item 4, Health and Safety Annual Report, starting on page 9. Who would like to speak at not great length, but to introduce this to us? Far away.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, really, I'll keep this as brief as I may, but happy to answer any questions that anyone has about the report, which you should all have a copy. But a quick summary of the year's activities shows that the RIDDOR reportable incidents, that is, injuries, diseases, dangerous occurrences, is at an all-time low. So that's good. It also, in parallel with the amount of training that we've delivered, they both go in opposite directions. One goes down and one goes up. We've delivered nearly 5,000 online and face-to-face training activities, all related to health and safety. And I'm happy to say that no one was killed or seriously injured as a result of any of our activities and infrastructure. We've had some engagement with the Health and Safety Executive as part of their number of national campaigns, one of which is hand-arm vibration syndrome, which they've come and looked at our direct activities that we deliver, green and clean, etc., and offered us a bit of advice as to how we might improve. But we've had no instances where they will charge us fees for their interventions. As I said, we've had no statutory enforcement notices, no litigation claims served on the council by any enforcement authority, and as I mentioned earlier, in terms of engagement, particularly with regard to the training activities and in particular with schools, we're at an all-time high in terms of delivery, so that's all positive.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the work you and your colleagues have been doing. Much appreciated. Colleagues, questions? Darren.
One question and a few comments. Firstly, Chair, may I suggest that I'm happy to propose endorsing the corporate action plan. The summary is excellent. No statutory enforcement notices. That's rather good for a company this size. No members of the staff or public were killed or seriously injured as a result of council work. Very good. RID or reportable incidents at an all-time low. Again. No significant asbestos management failings or adverse asbestos-related incidents. Very good. No Legionella outbreaks that's the council's fault. And training at an all-time high. That's a very, very impressive series of things for an organisation this size. And I think shows the consensus that this committee's had over several years in actually trying to make sure that we do it as well as possible. One small question. You've got produced the annual report for Employment Committee by the 31st of May 2018. There is no update or outcome. I'm assuming that this is the update and the outcome, so therefore you can tick the box. Am I correct, Mark?
Yes, you are, sir. Yes. Sorry.
Thank you. Sir, I have not been called for decades, so you can come back here again. But I'm happy to endorse the action plan, Chair.
I thought the police normally called you sir. Okay, Donna?
Thank you, Gerald. I mean, I agree with Darren. I think it's a great piece of work. And actually, when you look back at the health and safety reports that we've had over the last few years, this is a significant step forward. I think that having a dedicated team around you is clearly really paying off as well, because we're able to keep on top of things. Great to not see the port in here for the first time in a long time as well. So eventually the key handlers and the stevedoring, it's all going in the right direction, which is encouraging and certainly something that I got quite involved in previously. So very well done, and happy to, we'll obviously be supporting the report today.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with this? To accept the recommendation? Thank you. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes, I've seen the report and I see my colleague recommendation and question. All I recommend, everything is fine, and I'm happy to see this report. That's all.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, colleagues, are you all happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. Item 5, trade union facility time. John, do you want to introduce it? And then we have Richard.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, just by way of introduction, this is the latest in a range of things which by central government legislation we're required to publish for our eager proverbial army of armchair auditors to scrutinise. I think it's worth saying we don't have to do anything other than that. I mean, this is simply a case of publishing data, and obviously the purpose of it is to ensure there's proper accountability and scrutiny of the amount of time that's being released for trade union duties and activities. I wasn't proposing to go through the detail of the report. I mean, it is very set down to us. We don't get much discretion around this. We have to publish it in the form that's laid down and with the analysis broken down as it is. A couple of things just to help, or I guess, aid members' understanding of the context. Firstly, the report does very clearly break down between what are described as trade union duties and trade union activities. And just to explain that division, duties are functions around supporting employees in disciplinaries and grievances, around attending consultation meetings and those kind of things. Trade union activities are involvement in trade union meetings, etc. The reason it is different is because under the law we are required to release people for paid facilities time for trade union duties, but unpaid facilities time for trade union activities. Although I think us, along with the majority of organisations, probably don't draw too hard a line between the two. The other thing I'd say is that we've obviously only been able to produce this report based on information that's available to us through the actual recording of facilities time, and we've since this requirement came in, working with the unions to try and get accurate and decent sort of evidence trails, if you like, about the amount of facilities time being released. The prime vehicle for that is people to record it within the EBS system. That's the main Oracle system that people use for booking leave, recording sickness, etc. So the idea was for them to use that as well to record facilities time. In areas where that system's not available, there are other various manual processes in place. I think it's worth saying that this is the first year we've had to do it, and a lot of those recording mechanisms are in their infancy, and I think obviously I don't want to preempt what my trade union colleagues will say, but I know from previous discussions with them that they feel that this does under-record the amount of facilities time actually being released. And obviously I'm very keen to continue working with them to refine and improve those recording mechanisms, because I think it's really important that we do have an accurate figure. All I can say at the moment is that we obviously have to present the report based on as good a data as we've got. And that's clearly what we've done. So, subject to members being happy with the report, this will then be published on the Council's website and on the government website, as stated in the report.
Thank you. Richard White, as regional official for the Unite Union, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, just wanted to make a few points on this report, if that's okay. You know, I think we can thank the government's war on red tape for us having to discuss this. It seems that they want to slash it elsewhere, but when it comes to trade unions, it's, you know, more and more red tape as we go through. But just areas of the report I'd like to raise, and John's right, there's a view from trade unions that this underreports the amount of facility time. And with that, disguises a hidden cost. So the old regime we had, where we had a full-time allocated representative, they'd be released from their job and they would cover representation, meetings within the council, around HR, consultations, etc. Now we don't have that. We have to use more reps from elsewhere to cover those meetings. So an example being of a hidden cost is a rep from the ferry port who isn't covered by the amount of money quoted in this report will be released from their job to go and conduct a disciplinary or something like that. So there's that cost of their wages, plus if an agency person is required because they've got ships in, he should be tying up a boat, you know. That's that cost as well. And the added disruption to the services. Another example would be our rep within parking who takes up our 2.5 days release facility time. He's doing stuff above and beyond that 2.5 days. Now, that time that he's doing above and beyond, he should be issuing parking tickets, which generates revenue. So again, there's a hidden cost that isn't recognised within the report. The reason it's not recognised is because these ad hoc arrangements for release aren't recorded in any great detail. Now, from our point of view, we see the legislation, it puts a duty on the employer to record and report, not on us. However, whenever one of our reps requires release, they seek authorisation and agreement from their line manager before doing so. And I think that's the point, it needs to be recorded. So I think the council needs to be confident that what they're reporting is accurate, and I think the only way they can do that is if they record it themselves. Just another point on the report is the current way the funding included in this is allocated. I think I'm going to bore John with this, but we've got issues with that. The funding's allocated purely on membership. Now, that misses the point that not all union work is directly related to your amount of members. So examples being that if you have a larger membership, you may have more casework, more disciplinary grievances, etc. But HR meetings, consultation meetings, JOSIF meetings, the JNF at the ferry port, joint health and safety forums, felt fair panels and meetings like this are the same however large your membership is, they still all need to be covered. I don't think the current allocation of funding recognises that. And also wanted to point out in section 4 of the report, 4.1 mentions PCC recognises Unison, Unite and GMB trade unions for central function staff in NAU, NASUWT, ATL, NAHT trade unions, professional associations for education function staff and provides facility times as set out below. Unite, Unison and GMB are also recognised for education, support staff, so non-teachers, we're recognised. Now, the funding that goes from that the schools contribute for union time, we don't see any of that funding whatsoever. So we have to cover that additional burden of representation in schools out with the funding we receive from PCC centrally, and I think that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Richard. There seem to be 3 issues there that we might be able to look at in different ways. It would be helpful to have some sort of examination of how much time before the change in April 2017 how much time was spent on the sort of block grant bit, and how much time was then facility time that was booked out by people and on the system, and to see if we can see if any change between then and now, because we've had over a year since that financial change came in, and if Richard's point is right, that actually it's not a cost saving at all, it's just a cost shunt within the council, that hopefully that would come out, but it'd be useful to see some figures. John, I don't know if it's possible to interrogate the Oracle system in that way.
Not really, to be honest, because we've only started recording it in this level of detail to meet this particular reporting requirement. So that level of
So we can't. So we
data
don't
didn't
know
really exist before.
what the change. Okay, that's interesting. Same thing is in terms of the division of the 37,500 between the unions. I think, Richard, that if there was a joint paper from the unions collectively about how it should be divided up in a different way, I think we'd be very happy to look at it. But can I give that back to you to go and talk to your colleagues about whether you can come up with a joint view amongst yourselves to give us advice about how that should be divided? If not, it would seem to me that we'd require the wisdom of Solomon to try to recut that cake, and as the cake isn't very big anyway. But can I leave it with you to see if you can have a discussion with other colleagues in the different unions to come back with something. The third thing about not listing you in terms of education people, I think is a very good point, well made. John, can we go and look and see how we can address that and whether that makes a difference in terms of funding? Because if different unions are representing people in schools, and there'll be fewer and fewer of these schools as more and more become academies, it does need properly recognising and recording, doesn't it?
Yeah, that point certainly has been looked at before, and it was at the point when the decision was made to reduce the overall level of funding. I think, and I can come back with further details on this, but I recall that the challenge was that the council can't compel individual schools to decide whether to make contributions to fund union reps themselves. So I think the advice given to the unions at the time was that they should certainly sort of seek to have dialogue with the schools to see whether they could persuade them to make a suitable contribution. But I don't think I think the proposal at the time was that the council could sort of top slice school budgets to pay for it, and I think the advice at the time was that that wasn't possible within the legislative framework around school funding.
Okay, but I think the absolute minimum we need to do is to make sure that the correct unions are listed as supporting members in schools, and not just some of them.
Yeah, that was certainly not a deliberate omission, and we can make sure that's reflected in the paper that's published.
All right. Colleagues, Donna.
comments as opposed to questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think that the point that Richard made is a good one, that it should be managers, actually, if the duty and onus is on the council to report back the facilities time, I think it makes sense, as Richard said, if a rep has to get that signed off by their line manager to be able to go and do either a duty or an activity as part of their facilities time, then why would the manager not? You know, it says here that some staff don't have access to the EBS system, but I'm assuming that all supervisors and managers will do. So I think that's a sensible way forward. And actually, what's the point in collecting the data if it's not accurate? I mean, it means nothing then, does it really? In terms of the port recorded time, Richard made a comment that if someone was from the port, you then potentially have to pay an agency to come do the port handling, but that wouldn't have been recorded as per the Oracle system. But do you mean the port or MMD? Because the port's obviously a department of the council and therefore should be recorded. MMD, okay, has a separate system.
Yeah, so as an example, we have a representative who's a key hand in the ferry port.
In the port, okay.
So if he's released from his duties to go and represent someone in housing, the port are paying for that, and they're also potentially paying someone to cover for him while he's away.
Yeah.
So there's a double cost.
I wondered. I understand that the issue of the release of the job. What I meant was I think what you said is that that wouldn't be recorded because it's the port, but actually the port is a department of the council. And do they use Oracle the same as all of our other departments?
They don't use Oracle, but there is a recording system in place at the port, yeah.
Right, okay. I mean, I guess you could argue that for any department. It could be for a social, you could say that for anyone if they need to be backfilled. I get what you're saying. That's quite a specialist industry with key handling and stuff like that. So probably more difficult to backfill than maybe a social worker in a team of 60. So I take the point. I think the school funding one is an interesting one. I mean, I know we had this discussion last year. We did write to the schools to ask them and spoke at schools forum and the head teachers, the primary and secondary heads, to talk to them about a number of initiatives. School crossing patrols, for example, being another one that we tried to encourage them to contribute towards. I think if Unison and GMB do have a presence in schools, which clearly they do, then, I think even though we may not be able to make it obligatory for them, I think it might be interesting to pursue it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I would support that.
I think it's sensible to have a look at that further. Okay. All right. With those caveats, are people happy? Because we have to just put this stuff on the website because we have to do the red tape as requested by government. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Okay.
We are happy to go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, item 6, ladies and gentlemen, sickness absence report, John again, and good news in terms of reductions, but still some worrying areas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you'll see from the report, another small reduction in the overall level of absence, which has sort of been the trend over for some time now. Once again, just to contextualise it, that does put us a bit below the average within local authorities across the country, and whilst that's not something to be sort of smug about, given that the level's still higher than I'd ideally like it to be, that does at least put us in a favourable position in relation to a lot of other organisations. As I've noted in the report, I think we've got a continued good news story with regard to adult services, which has traditionally been an extremely high level of absence, and that's continuing to come down. But we do have some challenges in children's social care and in the port. I've also in the report listed a number of activities going on under that kind of well-being banner, and as members will be aware from previous meetings, I've been very keen to say that we'll sort of continue to do all we can in terms of managing individual absences properly and effectively and robustly and fairly, but the longer-term picture is much more about doing more and more to raise the overall level of well-being amongst our workforce, and it's really important that we continue to push that agenda.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
We don't have what it was last time.
It was 8.59 last time. It's down to 8.53.
Yeah, but it hasn't got it in the columns for us, has it? You've got short, medium, and long. You've got the total average days per person per year. But you haven't got what it was the last time. Normally we can see the trend if it's gone. That's the total. It says previously reported, but how do we compare that to the current then? That's the middle column, average per person per year now. So we're saying, for example, in adult social care, adult social care, previously it was 12.47 and now it's 12.1. Am I reading that right, John? So we're going from the end column to the middle. So that's what it was before and that's what it is now.
Yes, you're reading accurately.
Sorry, okay, it used to be laid out differently, sorry.
Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. Darren?
John, in the report you mentioned the port and the absences of the port around a few number of long-term absences that you say are being managed. Since the report was written, have they been managed, to sound vaguely Orwellian about it? Or is that particular position over, or is that going to just carry on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in this meeting it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on individual cases. I think, but I definitely would give you reassurance that the port director is well on top of these cases and they're being managed suitably. I think you have to be aware with the port, obviously you're dealing with a relatively small group of staff and therefore each absence is statistically significant, so you don't need many for it to change quite a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd just like to know, you said children and social care, there is some challenge for this sector. Why is the challenge? May I know what is the main issue?
I think the issue mainly is the level of stress we have with people, because they're dealing with caseloads, quite large caseloads, and often quite complicated caseloads, and dealing with children and family breakdowns, which can be really nasty. And sometimes, I used to work in the field in doing that, and sometimes that really impacts on people's health, and that's one of the reasons we get longer term unemployment, sickness absences. Colleagues at the end, anything you would like to add from that? Well, John, you'll know it directly.
Yes, I mean, I'm a social worker, not in adult social care, and I wouldn't work in children's sector for love nor money because of the sheer pressure.
Yep.
And I know colleagues who are regularly working till 10 o'clock in the evening compiling court reports, and the burnout is acute. So I do think there's a real problem. And what we really need is investment in social workers and have more social workers so the caseloads come down. That's the real answer. That would actually save money, because I think then you wouldn't have this on cost where people are off sick because of the huge amounts of workload and stress.
And I think that's what happened about 5 years ago. We found an additional load of money particularly within children's social care, to reduce workloads or caseloads rather, so that people weren't trying to carry so many different complex cases. And I think that has worked. But around the whole country, the number of children being referred into children's social care for assessments is rising and rising and rising, and therefore the numbers inexorably creep up in terms of caseload. Okay. Yeah.
We do normally have an additional bit of information on the sickness absence report, which gives a breakdown about where the sickness is, to answer Yaya's question around sort of departments and if it's flu, influenza, stress, anxiety, whatever. And we don't seem to have that information here this time. Any reason why?
Yeah, I mean, certainly well spotted, yes. We do normally provide another appendix with the main reasons for absence. Unfortunately, we weren't able to provide that for this meeting for technical reasons due to the change to the reporting suite within Oracle, and I apologise to members for that.
So when will we get it? And I'm not sure, I always found it terribly useful because other seemed to be the main cause, which was not hugely helpful.
We did take very specific measures to change that, and the other category did reduce, and I will certainly, I mean, I can circulate that appendix round separately to members, if that would be helpful.
I think so, but also when it comes back next time, because this is a report that comes back every so often, that if we could have that included, that would be helpful. But it would be very helpful if other doesn't dominate, because it's of no use to anybody.
Can I recommend that, as well as it being circulated to us, it's actually added onto the website, because there are people that may be looking at this, you know, that may want to have that information as well, and it should be available. And, you know, technical issues, this is quarterly, so there's been enough time to get this produced in time for today's meeting.
Okay, folks, with that addendum, are we happy to move on? Colleagues, happy? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Apprenticeship levy. John, I'm sorry, this is back down to you again, I think, or is it? It's becoming, we might need to rename the committee, the John Bell Committee, but...
I was certainly glad to see the health and safety item on there for that very reason. I would just say a few words of introduction. I do have with me Roland Bryant, who's the manager within my service, who has overall responsibility for this area. We're regularly providing committee with updates around apprenticeships, and that's very deliberate because, of course, it is a constantly changing agenda with the introduction of the apprenticeship levy, etc. I'll just wait for the bongs to finish, on they?
They have.
Excellent. And we have been asked by members to keep you very closely involved with how things are progressing with the levy, so it's obviously that's what we're endeavouring to do. I think fundamentally it continues to be a very good news story for us. As you know, we have a target as a public sector employee that we're supposed to hit in terms of number of apprenticeships, which we do hit. So that's excellent, and that puts us in quite an unusual leading position amongst other authorities of our size. I've given you quite a lot of information within the report about the types of apprenticeships that we're progressing, and I'm not going to go through that in sort of slavish detail, although I'm obviously happy to take any questions afterwards. But I think the essence of what I was trying to get across was the vast range of learning and development activities that are now coming under that apprenticeship umbrella. So this is absolutely not just all about kind of young people coming into the organisation, although clearly that's a very strong part of our apprenticeship programme, but we're also increasingly investing in the skills of our existing staff, which we can now do under the umbrella of the apprenticeship levy, through a whole range of professional and management qualifications. And a good example of that is that we've recently kicked off an MBA programme, which is funded through the apprenticeship levy, and obviously got quite a lot of interest in that from managers across the organisation. So whilst we may not be too keen on the basic principle of having to hand over a large chunk of our salaries budget every year to the government for under the apprenticeship levy, it is giving us a really good opportunity to properly invest in the skills of new and existing staff, and we've been very keen to grasp that opportunity with both hands. The other thing I would just draw your attention to, and you may be aware from previous reports that there has been a proposal that the council can, or organisations generally, can spend up to 10% of any unused levy money. We can give it away, effectively give it to other organisations. The rules on that are actually constantly changing to such an extent that they actually changed since we wrote the report, because the position at the time was that we could only actually give that money to one organisation. That's now changed. We literally got some guidance, I think, a couple of days after the publication, which said actually we can give that to more than one organisation. Now, one option for managing that efficiently could potentially be to set up something called an apprenticeship training agency, which we'd have to, there are a number of loopholes we'd have to go through to do it. We'd have to set up a separate company within the council in order to be able to do it. But that could be an efficient option for doing it, because it would allow us to essentially give that 10% to ourselves and then use that money to support a range of other organisations within the city, whether that was SMEs or voluntary sector organisations or whatever. But we'd be able to use it to further worthy policy agendas, as well as making sure that the money didn't go to waste or be returned to the government. So I'm asking within the report your approval to go ahead and look at the feasibility of doing that, and we'd obviously then come back to you to let you know whether that was something we felt was definitely worth doing, having looked at that feasibility study. So I don't think I need to say anything else about it. So I do have Roland here, who is the expert on the technical detail, and if any questions come up, I'm sure between us we'll be able to respond.
Okay, I think we have everybody. So if we go Darren, Yaya, Donna, if that's all right.
Perfectly fine, Gerald. I'm happy to propose the recommendations as per the report. I think, again, the whole issue and the discussion we've had in this committee about the apprenticeship levy has shown a high level of consensus, which is helpful, because I think we've realised both the opportunities and the limitations that exist within this. It's an incredibly good story that we've got so many apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are absolutely crucial. I think all parties on the council agree that apprenticeships are absolutely crucial in terms of improving the life chances of many, many people. And I think you've got to have as many options as we can taking it forwards. None of us want to hand the money back to the government. And we need to be as open as we can. We need to make sure that any apprenticeship training agency, I would suggest, John and Ronan, is robust and is robust commercially as well as within the local authority, because we want to make sure that we can get money in if we can for this as well. So I'm happy to do that, happy to look at all the options. My only concern is if they're changing once a report is written, are they going to change again? Yes. And if they're going to, thank you, Gerald. Thank you. That saves the officer saying anything. If they're going to change again, then it would be useful to know, because what we don't want to do is agree something and then 3 days later find the government changed the rules, which means we're going to change it again, because that is just a ludicrous way forwards.
As sure as night follows day, government will change regulations. Yaya.
As a local government, we have our responsibility to make sure our local people have more opportunity to work and they get job, not too much unemployment in our city. And I just like to know from you, if it's possible, what are the benefit as a city council we are achieving from the what is called apprenticeship, and what are the percentages are?
Well, I'm sure you'll get an answer from colleagues, but so for instance, yesterday I was at an event at the UTC, and there were 2 apprentices there, which one of whom had was working in adult children's social care, and one of whom was working, I think, in HR. But what we're doing is offering training opportunities for people to learn and come into the local government field, and that's helpful, and because that means there's a chance then that they will take a long-term career, and that's very positive and useful.
Yes, I mean, I don't have figures at my fingertips as to what percentage of our apprentices do come from the local area, although I'm sure I could find that. But I think I completely agree with you. I think apprenticeships, I mean, it has two reasons for really promoting it. One is that obviously it's about bringing really good skilled people into the council. I mean, they're our future lifeblood of the organisation. But yes, it's also about the council as a major employer in the city, taking a lead and providing opportunities for people in the city to become skilled and equip themselves for the future employment market. And that's always been an important angle that we've pushed with our apprenticeship programme, and I think that's absolutely the right thing.
Yes, I'd just like to add, my recommendation is we like to, as much as possible, every single sector, we like to give the opportunity to the local people, the apprenticeship, and also we got much people, they're getting more experience, they will be able to go anywhere else to get the job, and also we are getting some skill from them. We are achieving, they're working for the city council, and they're happy to help us, and we are proud to help them too. That's all.
Thank you very much. Donna.
Yeah, I mean, this is bittersweet, so start with the sweet bit first. I think that I really encourage and congratulate the government for bringing in the apprenticeship levy. I think it's a really good idea to encourage large employers to invest in their own local workforce, and to encourage people to upskill themselves, and also to upskill their existing workforce. And in fact, I met a social worker, a lady here who she's not a social worker, sorry, she was an admin officer in children's social care, and through the apprenticeship levy, she's now, I think she worked for us for something like 15, 16 years, and she's now able to undertake a degree to become a social worker, something which she thought she'd never really be able to do without taking some kind of pay cut and disrupting obviously her earnings. So there are some fantastic things that are going on here. The bittersweet with the government is that whilst they have good ideas, often, sometimes good ones, sometimes not so good ones, the devil is always in the detail. And for me, this is a slightly frustrating report with the government, because there is a huge amount of money that we are accumulating as a we're not even a large employer. We're a medium-sized employer really in terms of the UK. We're accumulating £750,000 of apprenticeship levy, and we're spending under Treasury, and that is, well, maybe that is what the Treasury intended, I don't know. But, you know, the point is that really, in the true essence of the apprenticeship levy, the government wants us to upskill local people, but the red tape has made it so difficult for us to do that. Now, maybe we're just not very good at doing it, so it'd be quite interesting to have a look at what other employers our size, particularly within local government, let's see what they're doing. What's Hampshire doing? What's Kent doing? What are Surrey doing? What are some of those other employers that will have staffing numbers similar to ours? What's Southampton doing? Maybe everyone's experiencing the same issues, and I'm sure because we're into the first year, they probably are. I would completely support the apprenticeship training agency. I don't know a huge amount about it. I only know what I've seen on face value here. But surely anything that means that we can keep that money in our own local economy and not send it back to, you know, W1 is certainly a good thing. We are an equal opportunities employer, and I remember I think it was the last time, maybe the penultimate time that I was on the politics show, we discussed this particular issue, and so I gave it, you know, I looked into it quite a bit before I went on there about our position. At that point, we had 129 apprentices, of which 3/4 were new to our organisation, please correct me if I'm wrong, and the remainder, so 20 to 30 of them, were people that we were upskilling from internal. Also wanted to know the information about the ages, and as it happens, we've got quite a few that are actually over the age of 35, which again is really, really encouraging. It's not, people think about apprentices being 17, 18, 19 years of age. Actually, it's not. There's a lot of people, like the lady that I mentioned from Children's Social Care, who's now being upskilled. I noticed that it says in the report that we're now at 132, so I think the figure I got back in March was 129, so we've grown slightly. I am still concerned, though, that because of the red tape that will come with the apprenticeship training agency, that we still won't get anywhere near the 750,000. I think that collectively we need to be really, really pushing the boundaries, really inventive about how we're going to get this money spent, and surely partnership working is the way forward, because I think we will struggle to do it within the government's red tape parameters all on our own, and it's just a travesty to give that money back to the Treasury.
Of course.
If I just give you a little bit of information, the table there, I think, doesn't quite reflect everything that we've committed. If you look at 11.6, the table shows what we spend out each month. Yeah. So actually, the amount that we've committed is actually higher than that now, Kate, isn't it? We did some sums earlier. So I think with these bigger programmes coming on and the diversity of apprenticeships.
We might get to where we need to be.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, that's what I do.
Could I also just add, hot off the press, one of our apprentices has actually won a national award last night. His name is Sam Rickard, and he works in housing, and he won That's it, yeah. Apprentice of the Year, and to get to there, he had to go through regional and then national things. So we're doing all right on there.
There's a girl as well. I can't remember she came. The two of them spoke at Shaking. They're really good.
Good.
Heidi.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Are you happy with the recommendations? Okay. Oh, Darren, yes.
Can I make a suggestion based upon what Donna and Yaya said? That I think, John, within your options analysis, that comparators with other local authorities are pretty helpful. I don't think that needs to be in a recommendation, but I think the advice, I think, from all of us would be have a look at what other authorities are doing, not just here but across the piece. You're doing it already, John. This is excellent.
Well, yeah, I was going to. I wouldn't normally come in at this point, but it is definitely worth saying that we are ahead of the game with this, and certainly some of those authorities which Councillor Jones mentioned have actually are coming to us for advice about how we're doing it, and to such an extent that we are starting to hire out Kate at the end of the table there, our apprenticeship officer, to advise other organisations on how to develop their own apprenticeship programmes. So whilst, yes, I mean, we will certainly continue to seek to learn from others, and there's a forum within the LGA for councils who are leading on this, which we're very plugged into for progressing apprenticeship work. Yeah, we will learn from others continually, but we're leading the pack on this particular one.
And then finally, thank you for that, John. I think finally also Yaya's point is a more general one, which I've been looking at within my cabinet portfolio, which is how to encourage local labour, not just local apprentices but local labour as well. We'll come to in a second issues around trying to improve affordability, trying to make sure people can. People don't have insufficient money at the end of the week, And I think anything we can do to assist that, particularly for people within the Portsmouth City Council boundary, is always highly helpful. I'm not totally sure that's a recommendation, but I think that's going to be a very clear steer from this committee that may be useful in future just to see how many people come from the Portsmouth City Council boundary. Those are my comments, Gerald.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Yo-Yo?
Yes, finally, just I'd like to recommend, if it's possible, could you contact some our local agency who are supplying the printership people to the supplying to the city or other organization. We like to get as much as possible people from our city to allowed to give the chance in our under our city council, every single sector, to people can get more experience, more capability, more skill, and we need to support them. That's all.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Item 8, colleagues. There is no paper, but we need a volunteer to go on to the Hampshire Pension Fund. This is a committee that both Donna and I have had the pleasure of serving on.
I'm not selling it.
I am not.
Very interesting.
And Donna, is that a volunteering to fill the role?
I've had my strokes on that one, I'm afraid.
It is possibly managing the largest amount of money that any of us get to have any say over anything. Yeah, 5 billion invested, and because local government do pensions in a much better way than central government. So in central government, if you're a civil servant or in the police or the forces or teachers or whatever, you pay your pension contributions and the government just takes that and spends it, and then it just pays people's pensions out of current taxation. In local government, we operate much more as a private sector organisation, and therefore local government pension funds, the contributions are saved and not spent and put into a fund and invested so that actually there is something to pay people's pensions in the future. So
subject to a huge deficit.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that,
which is just scary to even think.
Absolutely. At the LGA, I had to ask at our last meeting whether we were trading legally, and I was assured that we were. And I understand that Hampshire County Council is still trading legally. John, is Hampshire County Council trading legally?
I'm not sure I'm in a position to answer that one, Chairman.
I presume they are because they have income streams coming in. But anyway, Hugh Mason has served 3 years on it and has sensibly said he can cope with no more. So we have looked for a volunteer. I thought we had Jo Hooper, but she says that'd be difficult for her now. But Jeanette Smith has said that as her non-council work is also based at Winchester, she should be able to cover that, and as the relevant portfolio holder, then that seems a sensible thing. So I'm happy to recommend to colleagues that Councillor Jeanette Smith becomes our representative on the pension fund. Are you happy with that, colleagues? Okay, item 9, living wage. We have both Unite and Unison coming to speak, as Richard has already done so. Shall we start with John from Unison? Welcome, John.
Thanks, Gerald. Of course, the unions really do welcome that the living wage is now back on the agenda for the council. And just to remind people, the real living wage for people outside of London is currently at £8.75 an hour, due for an upgrade fairly soon, as I understand. But we have been here before in terms of the council, in terms of discussion of implementation of the real living wage. And we would strongly argue, on behalf of unions, and I'm sure the other unions would agree, that the living wage should be a consolidated payment, not a supplement on top of a wage. It's very important that it actually forms the real heart of and an integral part of people's wages. The other element, which is also extremely important, is that it's not only for people directly employed by the City Council. The living wage should also be paid and be part of the requirements for tenders and contracts for the council, so that all council contracts and staff are also paid on the real living wage. And it's important because without that, the council won't get full accreditation with the real the Living Wage Foundation. And I think it's important that the council does get credit and does meets all the requirements to be fully accredited as a real living wage employer. The living wage is increasingly recognised as the badge of a good employer. Many councils already signed up. I understand Southampton at the moment are actively considering signing up to this, and also actively considering two other elements which kind of go hand in hand with the real living wage, which is the Unison's ethical care charter and Unison's residential care charter, which very much are based on implementation of the real living wage and other basic employment rights like payment for travel time, proper training, paid time for training, and those sorts of things. So I think we want the whole kit and caboodle, not just an element of it, and not it done on the cheap. Low pay is a scandal, and it has a huge human impact. And we have real problems in this city of poverty, underemployment, not necessarily unemployment, but underemployment, where people are scrabbling to buy on very low hours, and zero-hour contracts. And I think it's important that the City Council acts in a leadership role. It has a real impact if the City Council says this is the way we want, this is what a good employer is like. It would have a huge impact on not only people obviously who do the contracts for the council, but generally within the Portsmouth area. It would set a good example for all employers to follow. Paradoxically, low pay is quite costly. And I think I'll explain what I mean by that. If you think about all the costs that are associated as a result of low pay, people being paid in-work benefits, because to subsidise their low wages, they get paid benefits from the Department of Work and Pensions. There's huge cost implications in terms of turnover of staff. And I'm going to talk a bit about an area I do know a bit about, which is adult social care and our contracting for domiciliary home care, residential care and nursing care. Personal care is highly intensive, highly skillful and highly individual. You look at the turnover we have in our care agencies where people, vulnerable people in our city, older people in our city, frail people in our city are getting different carers almost every day. Instead of having carers who actually get to know the person, how they like their care, what suits their needs, we also have a problem in terms of struggling to find care at particular times of the day. So people having to go to bed early at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening because you can't get care at 10 o'clock in the evening. So care work needs to be valued and we need career progression. And I think that's part of what the ethical care and the residential care charter is all about. We also have lots of breakdown in care. We also have safeguarding costs. And crucially, it really hampers our ability to provide preventative care. So we have cost shunts. Cost shunts to the council. So instead of, if you can't get your domiciliary care in at a certain period of time, the person deteriorates, then you end up needing residential care. Far more costly, far more disempowering for the individual as well. You also get cost shunts to the NHS. People, if they're not getting adequate care and support, will try and do things themselves. They fall, trip, end up in accident and emergency, bed blocking up at QA. So we have to look at better wages being not only just the cost of the wages, we have to look at the wider cost. We also need to consider that actually when people are paid a decent wage, a lot of that money is reinvested into the local economy. Their spending power will come back and help increase taxes, but also boost businesses in the local area. So yes, we want the living wage, but it's important not to try and cut corners in terms of its implementation, because if we cut corners, it will produce additional costs, both human and financial.
Thanks very much, John. Richard.
Yeah, thank you. Like Unison, Unite welcomed the submission of this report, although in my personal view we shouldn't be discussing it. Back in 2014, I spoke at Employment Committee. The proposal was to pay the living wage as a supplement, and I said, don't do that. Pay it as a consolidated payment so it's secure in people's pay packets, because if it's a supplement, it can be taken away. And that's exactly what happened. In December 2015, I think the decision to freeze the lowest paid workers in this council's pay was disgraceful. And I think the equality impact assessment that's been submitted with this report really brings that sharply into focus, because it says what outcomes do you want to achieve? To lift employees and those who provide a service to the City Council out of work in poverty. It's lifting people out of poverty. It's not paying for them to go on a holiday. This is lifting people out of poverty. And also the impacts, last sentence, implementation of the living wage will promote equality for women. The previous decision did the opposite. We are where we are. It's good that it's being implemented now. I'm sure it'll be welcomed by everyone. The report in front of us does have a couple of flags in it, which quite rightly it's John's job to point out to you, but one of them is the impact it could have on employees in bands 1 and 2 being paid the same, and refers to supervisors potentially being paid the same as people that they're supervising. I'm not aware of any supervisors on band 1 and 2. There may be, but I'm not aware of them. But that's an issue that already exists because the minimum wage is catching up. And also further down, there's reference to employees to be transferred into PCC. I think what we would like, and I'm sure John would agree, is where people to be transferred into PCC and they're on not just low wages, but full stop, we would want discussions with PCC at the earliest opportunity to discuss whether we can move them onto PCC terms and conditions. I understand the protections afforded to 2P, and you can't impose changes, but you can offer them. And, you know, if people want to take up a better contract, then I think we should be offering it to them.
Okay. Thank you both Eunice and Unite for coming, and thank you for your views. I think I'm going to ask just Sue to just update the financial position, because I think there's been a change since the report was written, and now where...
Yes, in paragraph 8.2, the figure relating to the cost in schools is actually 26,000. It's not the 94 that's quoted in there.
So that reduces the cost for schools from 94,000 to 26,000, which is a fairly substantial difference. Thank you, Sue. But it's a useful piece of fact. I agree with quite a lot of what's been said from our colleagues in the union. I thought that when we brought in the real living wage for people working at the City Council in 2014, that was something that we should be proud of and people would stick by. That didn't happen, and I think it is something that we should all regret, that the people on the very lowest salaries here in the City Council have had a pay freeze for 4 years, while their rent has gone up, their council tax has gone up, food, fuel, all have gone up, and the very people on the very lowest wages doing some really important jobs have had a pay freeze, while people at the highest salaries have had pay rises. And I think that's absolutely wrong and a disgrace for this council. And I'm pleased that I hope today we will be able to put that enormous injustice right. I think we also need to learn from the past, and I think both John and Richard talked about this being a consolidated payment. I think that is the right way to go because it protects it for the future. I think it's also right that it does it because it affects people's pensions. And we need to think about trying to make sure that people are not in poverty all the way through their lives. So I think this is something that the Liberal Democrats had within our manifesto, that we would bring back the living wage. I'm pleased that we're going to be doing that. I'm pleased that the Labour Party also had that within their manifesto, and I hope that we're able to fulfil that for both parties. I think it is absolutely right that we do this. I think there are some things we'll need to look at, and there are some of the things that the unions have brought up that we will maybe need to do over time, and we will need to work with the unions to talk about what happens with 2P, what happens with contractors. But I think the basic and the important thing we do today is to re-establish ourselves as paying the real living wage, and try to make sure that people get that soon. And my recommendation would be that we don't wait until the next financial year to do this, but we start this from the 1st of September, so that people do see a real difference in their pay packets from the 1st of September. I think there is an argument that we should wait until the next financial year to do this, but I think there has been an injustice done, and we should try to make sure that we address that as soon as we possibly can. Colleagues, I've got Darren and Yaya.
More than delighted to second that recommendation, Gerald. the truth is that poverty pay is something that really affects people across the city. We've got lots of people who simply haven't got enough money to spend at the end of the week, and whether in the private sector, whether in the public sector, whether self-employed or whether they're employed. And you're absolutely right, both Richard and John are absolutely right, that the City Council needs to have, needs to take some leadership. I'll be very polite, Joe, we haven't quite necessarily had the leadership we need in this over the last 4 years. I understand the reasons why. I just disagree with them. And I think that what we need, but I think Gerald's key point is correct, and I will wait until the bongs are finished. They finished, excellent. Which is that it is just wrong to have the lowest paid people on the council getting a pay freeze and the highest paid people on the council getting a pay rise. That, to me, has been systematically silly for the last 4 years. The message it sends out to the lowest paid people, the message it sends out to everybody in poverty pay is not great, to be very polite about it. And I'm delighted that we're able to change this. My view is that Portsmouth should be a living wage city, and it should be people across the piece. Richard, some of us within our housing portfolios, and John may have already started conversations around contractors and to see whether it's deliverable. Gerald's point is also correct. We may want to do everything yesterday, but we can't, and we've got to start from somewhere. And I'm fully expecting you shouldn't ignore government cuts and all that sort of stuff, but as an administration we can't. But what we do want to do is to start making statements today, and that is something that is really, really important. So I hope we can start somewhere. I'm delighted that we're doing it as a consolidated payment. I'm delighted we're doing it in this financial year. It is something 3/5 of people who voted in the local council elections voted for parties who did this. And most of the councillors belong to groups who did this. So there has been a change in the election in May, and I'm delighted that within a few short weeks we're able to start the process of trying to reduce poverty pay across our city. Gerald, I'm delighted to second the recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'd just like to say, 20 years ago, myself or some other people, they paid £10 for the train fare from Freighton to London Waterloo. The same time, right now, I have to pay 33 to 35 pounds. But according to this, everything is increased, but people's wages is not increased. So whatever is passed, I like to see the present, and I'm delighted to accept and delighted to recommend what the living wages to accept. Other things, we got the deputation, which is the council give the very house subcontract outside to the public, private organization. Might be we can't look into that matter right now because there is different term and condition different. Maybe some people can do within 1 hour, 10-hour job. He got his technique, he can employ, he put his expertise. So we should look into for the timing, which is under the city council matter. So that's all, and I'm happy to recommend for the living wages. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Donna?
2 questions and a comment, please, if that's okay.
Sure.
One, John, which, Gerald, you may know this as well, but the National Living Wage Foundation and the Foundation Living Wage, are they 2 different organisations? Has the National Living Wage Foundation, which is what all of the reports we've ever had that have come to this committee before, and the proposal that Gerald has supported, solidly for 4 years, was about signing up to the National Living Wage Foundation. Here we have the Foundation Living Wage.
John? Can you give your
Yeah, the organisation is the Living Wage Foundation, and therefore, by definition, the living wage that they come up with is referred to as the Foundation Living Wage. So there is only one organisation.
But yeah, it may be helpful to refer to it in future as the real living wage.
Okay, so whilst you've agreed that you're going to pay £8.75, which I think is wonderful, I'm pleased you're doing that, are you going to sign up and become a member of the National Living Wage Foundation? Are you going to sign up to that as an employer for Portsmouth City Council? Is that what you're proposing with this as well?
We need to do more work to get there because that affects how we work with contractors as well, and that will take longer to be able to do. But it was important to take the first step and the public step in terms of the things where we have direct control over wages of people working for the City Council, and take that step here and now. We'll have to work further on becoming accredited to the whole thing, but I hope that we'll have a report back on how we're able to do that in the future.
Okay, now on to my comments, of which I think I've got 4. First of all is that, whilst I was leader of the council, facing, almost £50 million worth of reduction in spending, the one point I made consistently was that this wasn't about us not wanting to pay that for the lowest paid. It was about protecting jobs in the council that were also at risk. And therefore, I'm delighted today that £8.75 is now going to be paid to the lowest paid workers, which is afforded to this council because of the £10 million, circa £10 million, which my Conservative administration was able to generate for this council over the last 4 years. And I am certain that if there had not been 4 years of Conservative rule in this council, the financial options to this employment committee today to make this recommendation and change to increase that minimum pay to £8.75 would not be there. And it was the direction of travel that we were always going in. And jobs were at risk, and jobs had been decided to be cut, such as community wardens when I took over. We saved those jobs, and we saved a number of jobs of people paid the lowest in the council. I also want to make a point that I think it is important to pay people, a salary that they can live on, a salary that they can be proud of. But we also need to recognise that there is also a part here to play, and we heard deputation made quite well about responsible employers, and that is about creating and maintaining inspiration and aspiration for the local employment workforce in the city and those that work directly for us. And actually, the fact that the United Kingdom now has the lowest level of unemployment in the country, and I think almost 50 years, is an inspiration in itself. And I'm pleased that we've got more people of working age in this city that are now employed than we have ever had before, or certainly since the Office of National Statistics have been recording that data. That's because a life of being on benefits through choice, which I appreciate for many is not the case, but sadly there were some that were abusing the system. That is no longer an option. They must go into some kind of training. They must go out and be seeking jobs, and if they don't, they can't continue to claim benefits. And as a consequence, more people are now working, more children in this city are now growing up with working parents, with parents that are undertaking college courses, and that is surely good for the city, and it's surely good for our young people. So I am pleased with this. I would like to take it a step further and say that, if this is about equality, and this is about, Gerald, you have made it very clear to me for 4 years, quite, with quite some passion and gusto at some points, that this council should be a National Living Wage Foundation signed up employer. And the point I made to you about that, when you have repeatedly made that message to me at every single employment committee, I think, for the last 4 years, and several motions through full council, my point to you was the risk of that is that the Living Wage Foundation may be £8.75 now, but it could go up to £10 or £12 or whatever within 2, 3, 4 years, and we would not be able to control that. And that, therefore, was a risk to us. And you said to me, that's irrelevant. We should be paying the lowest paid the right and proper money. I also made the point previously, so specifically to John, when he and I had our briefings and conversations about some of these reports before they were coming forward, was the inequality amongst schools, where schools are not prepared to adopt the same stance, but we are, and we are in a legal relationship with the schools, albeit many of them are now academies, but particularly those that aren't. Are we going to have some kind of challenge from an equality perspective? We had this where some dinner ladies weren't being paid the same hourly rate as our staff, and actually that wasn't right, and we had to address that. So I do think there could be legal challenges down the line. I hope the schools do follow suit with us, because I think, as we've heard from John, it is right that the council does set the agenda going forward there, as long as it is sustainable. But the National Living Wage Foundation, you said you wanted to sign up to it. That's what you put in your manifesto. I'll wait to see you do that.
Thank you. I think actually what we said in our manifesto was we would pay the living wage. Yeah, absolutely. No. So we said we'd pay the living wage, and I'm really pleased to see that we are doing this. and I hope that we will get there to be able to do that. But I think one of the things that we need to learn from the last 4 years, because when we brought this in under the last Lib Dem administration, we thought that it was such an obvious thing to do that people would just carry on doing it. I think one of the learning points was that with a Conservative administration, their decision was to freeze the pay of those on the lowest pay in the country. Well, Don, I haven't interrupted you, and I hope you will have behaved with the same level of courtesy to which we. So no. So, Donna, I hope you will have the same level of courtesy as I've shown to you and not interrupt you. I have not. What I've said is that we will pay the living wage. What I think we need to do is to make sure that people working at this council are protected if there is ever again a Conservative administration who would want to take away the living wage. So that's one of the learning points out of this, is we need to make this as a consolidated payment to protect future generations of low-paid workers from the viciousness of the previous Conservative administration. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that you've brought up and see if I can answer some of them. That there is a risk to the council of people making decisions about levels of pay. We are part of a national pay bargaining system, and therefore we don't have control over that. In exactly the same way, this is a national system of the living wage being decided, the real living wage, by the Living Wage Foundation. So it's in exactly the same position as we have for everybody else's money in the council. In terms of challenge, there is always the possibility for challenge, but when the real living wage was being paid by this council before, there was no challenge. And that again is a piece of learning for us to make sure that we're not failing to pay a living wage to people just because we are frightened of a legal challenge which didn't exist and didn't come to fruition. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have had a discussion. I think we all know where we are. Donna, if you'd like to come back, and I will not interrupt you and try to make sure that I behave with a courtesy that you haven't shown to myself.
I believe in democracy and freedom of speech, so please do feel free to interrupt me if you think there's anything I'm saying that's not true, because I would like everybody to have the opportunity to be able to fully understand and hear our thoughts as they are said. I think it's right and proper that sweeping generalisations are not made where they are creating an impression where it's untrue. So please do feel free to stop me and interject at any point. I'd welcome your comments, Gerald. In terms of the comment, viciousness of the previous Conservative administration, I won't say any more if you are prepared to withdraw that comment, because it's simply not true, and it is creating an impression of a political party that simply did their very best. If you are prepared to withdraw that statement, then I will not carry on and make my further comments. If you don't, then I will like to continue.
I'm very happy to withdraw the word vicious and replace it with the word callous.
Okay, in which case you're going to leave me with no option then. If you're prepared to call the previous Conservative administration callous, I'd like to give you some examples of where I think your administration was particularly callous when I took over in 2014, particularly where you didn't support people that had mental health issues. And it's not just the previous victim of a former member of your cabinet at the time you were running this council. It's also around the fact that you cut, I think, £159,000 from mental health support. You cut support to the disabled. You were going to wipe out completely the community warden service. I can continue. So when we talk about callous, what my administration did for 4 years was protect jobs and make sure that those that were paid the less, if you had continued, your proposals were to remove their jobs completely, not just pay them an extra £1.50 an hour, but to remove the jobs completely. What we did over 4 years was go out and generate income, something that wasn't even a twinkle in your eye when you ran this council for 10 years. And as a consequence, we have saved hundreds of jobs across this city. We have been able to renegotiate contracts and running them far better and far more efficiently than you were ever capable of doing. So when you talk about callous administrations, ones that closed all of the public toilets, you were paying £170,000 a year to lock, unlock and clean toilets. I reopened them using our own low-paid green and clean service staff, and we were able to run them and clean them and lock them and unlock them for between £7,500 and £9,000 a year. So when you talk about callous, Gerald, I think that's a very, very sad word to have used. I'm very disappointed that you did that. And like I say, I would welcome any further comment from you. I'm sure you're going to have something to come back on. But I think for you to say that we were purposefully trying to detriment people in this organisation that were paid the lowest amount of money is appalling. I always maintained as chair of the Employment Committee that we were doing our best to raise money and we would revisit this, which is exactly why I proposed this, came back to this committee at the last time it was at the full council when I was leader of the council.
Thank you. I think our memory of the facts are different, and the facts speak for themselves. For 4 years, the lowest paid people working for this council have had their salaries frozen. Darren.
Let me return to a report, if I may, about the positive impacts, because I think the futility of this discussion over the last 4 years has been in part that the positive impacts of paying the living wage, which John and Richard have identified, have not been really discussed in any detail. So I want to return to the equality impact assessment, if I may. Page 3. Using your existing data, what does it tell you? And it says, according to the organisations that have implemented living wage, the benefits of doing so are great. For example, a reduction in sickness absence, an increase in morale and motivation of workforce. Source, the organisation whose approach we're about to adopt. Employers who pay the living wage are seen as progressive, and it is thought that in the future, with the number of employers signing up to the living wage, and Chair, I remember when Boris Johnson was running the Greater London Authority and was Mayor of London, he signed up to this approach as well, a progressive approach. Those who don't may be seen as unethical. Paying the living wage can contribute significantly to breaking cultures of dependency through earning a decent standalone wage rather than having to claim benefits to top up. One of the frequent arguments we've had is about schools. It says the majority of schools are 87%, that's more than 5 schools in every 6, are already signed up to paying the PCC living wage allowance at the rate of £7.85. There is an issue around it going up to £8.75, that's true. But the impact is now £74,000 less than it was in the report. I believe that is a price well worth paying to tackle poverty pay in this city. Not a political comment, just the comments of a report in front of us.
Thank you very much. Yaya?
Yes, as a Labour member from the Labour Party, this is our manifesto said we should give the people to the public living wages, and I am here and I am trying to strongly recommend to approve that. Plus, every one of us here to do the job for the public, maybe past and now, because everyone try our best to do something for the public, and I hope everyone should do. And that's all. I think we are here for that. And we could not go what is done and what is happened. And every single job risk is there. Risk can be happen anywhere. So we have to look forward, what is right and what we should do according to current situation. Everything is gone high. Every single sector everything is gone high. But people wages are low. Yes, we need to protect the peoples and we need to see the current situation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm sorry it got slightly heated, but I think we need to recognise that both recent administrations have worked to try to reduce contract prices and increase income, and I think it's right that we recognise that both the previous Conservative administration and the previous Lib Dem administration did that, and I'm sure we will continue to do so. Just to bring this back to real people, this is about domestic assistants, laundry assistants who are working in our care homes, cleaners, library assistants working in the City Council libraries, being paid a real living wage. I am very proud that I hope the Council will now do this, and that a manifesto commitment made by both the Liberal Democrat and the Labour campaigns in the recent elections will be fulfilled. So, ladies and gentlemen, can I see those in favour of paying the real living wage as set out in the report from the 1st of September 2018 could please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. My thanks to everybody. I think that concludes the meeting.